So this workshop is called Revolutions. But before I actually go into that, I want to start with gratitude. You know, I very much appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you all here today. Thank you, organizers. Thank you, Police and Antolanji, for creating this environment so long ago that still continues to inspire all of us. So thank you for all of this, for putting this together. Thank you all for spending your long weekend here and for giving me this opportunity. So we're going to talk about revolutions. I'd like to talk about revolutions. I also like to talk about hip hop. So we're going to start off with that. So I've always been a fan of hip hop since I was very, very young. And I think maybe it was just the time that I grew up in sort of the heyday of hip hop music. And I'm almost to the point where, you know, I've always sort of considered myself a bit of a historian. I know the facts, I know the figures, I know who brought what album out at what time, what tracks were on what album at the time. I could always be quizzed by anybody. And so I was really excited when this documentary came out on Netflix called Hip Hop Evolution. Has anybody seen it? A couple people? All right, good. It was good, right? It's a good documentary. And so, like I said, I've always considered myself a bit of a historian, so I grew up knowing who the real pioneers of rap were, who the real people who laid the foundation of rap were. So, you know, in the late 70s, Rappers Delight came out with the Sugar Hill Gang. You know, then of course Big Daddy Kane, Public Enemy, KRS-One, Run DMC. These were the people who laid down the foundation. But when I saw this documentary, I was a little taken back because I learned something new about the origins of hip hop. You know, this was the time where in the midst of the late 70s, where where disco music was the most popular thing at the time, and people were getting dressed in their finest clothes and heading to downtown, into Midtown Manhattan to go to the nicest disco clubs. While this was all going on, there was a significant amount of socioeconomic problems happening in the middle of the Bronx in New York. And on the west side of the Bronx, there would be these house parties going on where they wouldn't play the regular disco pop music that was happening at the time. And there was a DJ, a man by the name of Kool Herc, who would organize these parties. He would send out little flyers to his friends that looked like this, and he would pile as many people as he can into a rec center, and he would bring out different types of music. He would bring out the old school soul music and funk music, and he would play this music, and the people loved it. The people loved it. They would come from everywhere, all around. The students, teenagers, gang members would put all the differences aside, and they would all come to the west side of the Bronx to go to these parties. Now, what Kool Herc did that was different was when he would play the records, there was always this part in soul music and funk music that had what was called the breakdown. It was this extended set where it would just be the bass and the drums playing over and over, this repetitive beat. And he would continue with the record. Some of you may not know what a record is, but he would extend the beat, extend it, sometimes playing two records at the same time to have that beat go longer and longer. And this sort of breakdown is actually where breakdancing came into play, the b-boys would come into play, and between this innovative style of playing music and extending beats, along with Kool Herc's friend, Coach Barack, who would grab the microphone and just hype up the crowd with his mic and get the crowd going. Between these two, they would change the face of hip-hop music. They were really the inspiration for a lot of what was to come beyond. So just because, so here I thought, you know, all those other people, the Public Enemies and you know, were really the founders of rap. And although they might be some of the publicly known pioneers of rap, the fact is, it was a handful of people like Kool Herc, who had an innovative way to play his music that would eventually give rise to other DJs like Africa Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, and the rest is history. So when we think about rap, when we think about hip hop, and we look back at you know, who were the big names, you'll see the Iconics, the Biggies, and the Tupacs. But really, it was these guys. It was these guys that you'll never hear about, who tried new ideas, creative ways, innovative ways, courageous things to go against the mainstream, and eventually created a movement. And so, this whole workshop isn't really about hip hop. but it is about revolutions. And so what this whole sort of episode taught me was that revolutions sometimes work like this. Although there are always iconic figures and there are always iconic movements, oftentimes the spirit or the inspiration of a movement started somewhere else. They started from small acts of change, small acts of courage, small acts of bravery that would ultimately create transformational change. So when I think of civil rights heroes, who are some of the people that come to your mind? Top 2 civil rights heroes.
Malcolm X.
Sure, Malcolm X. Anybody else? MLK, right? I swear I didn't plan this. But you know, these are some of the 2 that come to mind. I think about these 2, I think about the I Had a Dream speech. But in fact, there would be no Malcolm X. There would have been no MLK had it not been for Rosa Parks. Shout out to the DVD shirt.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be for Tommy Smith and John Carlos in the 1968 Olympics. It wouldn't have been, had it not been for Ruby Bridges, who decided to have that courage to go to the school that day. There would have been no Martin Luther King. There would have been MLK. John Lewis, the Selma March. These are the acts of courage. These are the acts of courage. These are those small moments of change that inspired the revolution. If you think about it, it's really like that. You can even take that back to Sikh history. You know, I ultimately think the Khalsa was not formed in 1699. The Khalsa was formed that day when Guru Sahib said, "I refuse to wear the jinn." That day, it was these small acts of courage that would ultimately lead to the larger revolution and the larger movement. Questions, thoughts?
Can you explain what happened in each of the pictures? Because I'm not really aware.
Sure. Rosa Parks, she is the one who refused to sit in the back of the bus where African Americans were forced to sit. And by doing that, she was arrested, and that would really be the beginning of the bus boycotts in Montgomery, Alabama, which was really one of the impetus of the civil rights movement. Then the 2 gentlemen in the Olympics, 1968, in the midst of the civil rights movement, decided to give their silent protests to the movement by raising their hands in defiance when the national anthem was being played. Ruby Bridges, this is sort of right around the time of segregation, so this was desegregating schools, and so this was the symbolic, essentially, first person who went to school that day, and under heavy protest, she went to school that day, and she had government officials there to escort her. And then the Selma March, anybody can tell us about Selma?
Oh yeah, wasn't it when the Voting Rights Act
Yep.
of 1965, or when the voting and they were doing voting rights drive in Selma, and then they had some boycotts, and they had a voter registration drive.
Yes.
Because in order to like prevent the literacy test.
Right. So it is definitely, yeah, you're right, in the sense it is tied to the voter rights. Again, all tied to the civil rights movement. So that's just a little glimpse on each of these here. So revolutions. Right? It is, when I think about the umbrella of revolutions in the context of now Sikhi, you know, I start asking myself this question that came up this morning of when we talk about social justice activism, or I sometimes use social justice activism and SYANA interchangeably. You'll hear why I think that way as we go through this. I start asking myself that question that we started on today. Well, what makes activism Sikh activism? And I was a little nervous when some of those things started talking about this because I was like, oh my gosh, that's my workshop. And luckily there was like 4 minutes left, so I was like, okay, you can only go so far. So I had this question, what makes activism Sikh activism? We've all worked with activists before. But sometimes when I've been in sort of the middle of it, I often wonder, like, what is it that makes the activism different? And in my sort of summary of things, there's 3 components of it. There's love, there's justice, and there's judgment. And we'll touch on each of these. You may call it something different, but this in my head is how I was able to summarize it. So let's start, and to me this also summarizes the why, the what, and the how of Sikh social justice activism. So let's start where we start everything when it comes to Sikh. Let's start with love. I'm going to ask you to get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. There should be some in front on your table. Otherwise, there's some there. This is the only work I'm going to make you do, so don't worry. It's not going to take more than 2 minutes.
Here we have
on paper?
So this is to answer the question of why. Why is it important that we at SYX care about social justice activism in the first place? So this is, again, to answer the question, why does it matter in the first place? Why does it matter? Why should SYX care about social justice? So I'm going to ask you to make a graph that looks kind of like this. You don't have to draw all the lines in the middle. I just want you to have a y-axis, x-axis, and 10 lines going across, small lines, just these right here. And then 10 going top to bottom. And label it 0 to 10 here, 0 to 10 here. And I want you to write on the y-axis, love for the good, x-axis, willingness to change. Give me a second to create this graph. Just 0 to 10 on the x, 0 to 10 on the y, love for good on the y-axis, willingness to change on the x. Now what I'd like you to do is I want you to think to yourself, how much do you love the good? And this can be an independent exercise. You don't have to share this with anybody. I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm going to force anybody to give an answer. So this can be just for you. How much do you love the good? And I'm not going to get too far into what that means. You know what that means. You think about it. Think about being here at the retreat. Think about how you've grown up, the environment you've grown up in, the Barney that you've read, the experiences that you've had. How much do you love the good? 0, not at all. 10, more than anything. And plot wherever you are on that. If you're like a 2, just make one mark right here, that's all. If you're a 6, make one mark right here. It's up to you. That's your love for the good. And once you're done with that, I want you to go to the willingness to change. How good are you at changing yourself? How willing are you to change? 0, not at all. I'm terrible at change. 10, I can change on a whim. I'm completely willing to change. Plot wherever you are on that graph. And now once you have these two plots, this is optional, you don't have to do this, but if you want to, just draw a sort of a square between the two. So let's say I was a 3 here and I was a 2 here. I'm just going to draw this little rectangle to connect the two. And then draw a line through the intersection. So again, find the dot that connects the two, where the 2 points intersect, the 2 lines intersect, and then draw a line. Anybody have any questions with this exercise? Make sense? All right. So, again, you don't have to answer this question, but in the love for guru, how many of you were 5 or higher? A little more than half. Okay. Willingness to change, 5 or higher. About half. So, I just thought about this morning. I did not make up this exercise. I sat through this when I was about 19, 20 years old. Actually, it was 1995, this retreat. And that very first retreat that I've been to here. And I remember the Benji who took me through this exercise. And I put myself down as a 10 and a 10. And I was the first one done. I had 10, 10, 10. And she asked a little differently. She said, who would like to give their answer? And I was like, me, 10, 10. And she was like, okay, that's cool. Why are you a 10 in love for Buddha? I said, because I do love the Buddha. Like, I'm a Sikh, I have my gaze. Other kids, my friends I grew up with, they cut their hair. Look at me, I'm Sikh. I have my gaze. I think I said I have my gaze at least 3 or 4 times. I got my t-shirt. I'm proud to be a Sikh t-shirt on. Like, what else, do I need to prove? I obviously have love for the Guru. I could have done anything this weekend, So obviously, I'm a 10. I love the Guru. Love the Guru. And then she said, what about willingness to change? I said, yeah, 10. And she said, okay, well, how often do you do your bond? I said, well, most days. At least once a week, maybe every other week. How much do you owe a month for your bond? Oh, okay. She says, how do you ever wake up and I'm like, I was like, yeah, I can. She says, do you ever really just sort of take time to read a Shabbat to yourself or learn about it? I was like, not really. Then she says, well, do you do seva on a regular basis? Not really. Says, do you find yourself when you meet other people that you feel this sort of compassion that you can see walking with everybody? It's like, not really. And so what I realized was my love for the Guru was a 10, but my willingness to change was probably around a 0 or a 1. So it kind of made me wonder, if I really wasn't willing to change my actions, did I really love the Guru in the first place? And Mother's Day just passed a little while ago, and my mom was never one for Mother's Day cards, but I would always give, because I felt like I had to, I would always give her these Mother's Day cards. And then once she said, you know what, you always say the same thing in the card, oh, I love you, happy Mother's Day. And I remember once saying, well, if you love me so much, you don't have to give me the card, just clean your room more often. And I could just kind of laugh it off then, but it is something that kind of sits in my mind, love to her was not about the card. It wasn't about the feeling. It wasn't about the emotion. It was about my actions. And I think whether it is a relationship with your mom, whether it's with your friend, whether with your spouse, or whether with your guru, it all comes down. What are your actions? How much are you willing to change yourself? And so, this idea of love being a verb, being an action, being something that we have to do, I think, at least in my interpretation, very much ties into what the Guru asks us. So Guru Sahib says, Saach kahon, sun leh sabhe jin prem kiyo te neem kapaya. Listen, I speak the truth. Those who love will attain. And to me, at least the way I interpret this is not just a feeling. This is not just an emotion. This is an action. And then Guru Sahib says, Jo to prem, kilim ka jao, sakrat ali, if you want to play this game of love, come to me with your head. Come to me, walk down this path with your head and your palm. Again, I don't think Guru Sahib is mincing words here. This is not a feeling. This is not an emotion. This is an action. So to me, this answers the question of why. Why does social activism matter? Because I believe that love is an action. Still might be great, but that's okay. Let's continue through this and see how this progresses. Then there's justice. Yes, I know this is the logo. So then there's justice. So this to me answers the question of the why. So we know, the what? The social justice, the Sikh model of social justice activism. And as I mentioned, we started talking about this earlier today. What is the Sikh model for social justice activism? What are your thoughts? What are the attributes of the Sikh model of social justice activism? Or seva?
Langar.
Anji?
Langar.
Langar, okay. What are some other, how would you describe it? What makes it Sikh activism? What makes it Sikh social justice activism? That's a good example. What are some attributes? What does it have to be considered Sikh activism?
Seva for the farm.
Say again?
Seva for the farm.
Seva for the palm. Okay. What else?
Inclusive.
Inclusive. What else?
And making sure equality
Okay.
for all humankind.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Selfless, from the heart.
Selfless from the heart. Okay. Good stuff.
Truth.
Truth. Okay. This is all awesome stuff. Oh, sorry. Is there another hand?
Oh,
Okay. Go ahead. Creating systems. I like that. I like that. Good. So these are all good answers, and I would just add them all to what the list that I'm about to give you here. And this was the list that I had come up with. One is it's without ego, and I think that's self-explanatory. I don't need to go into that. One, there's this element of humility, again, straightforward, and compassion. And you know, I'll stop for a second, and before I go into some of these others, I remember many years ago, it was probably about 15, 16 years ago, I helped organize a human rights rally in Chicago, in Grant Park. And it was a pretty big undertaking because we were trying to make it not just about Sikhs, but we were basically getting all minorities in South Asia and having sort of this group human rights rally in the city. And to me, it was this great opportunity for social justice activism. And it was a nightmare for me personally. The event went fine. But for me, it was just, for those of you who have organized large events like this, it was so difficult. You know, I had buses that were supposed to show up, people didn't show up on time, people were trashing the park when they were not supposed to, speakers who were supposed to come didn't show up, people who weren't supposed to speak wanted to speak, people wanted more time than they were supposed to get, some people just wouldn't get off the stage, people were complaining to me that it wasn't political enough, other people were complaining to me that it was too political. It was just such an unbelievably stressful event for me. I was just so upset and so angry at everything that transpired throughout that day, about how disorganized I felt it was and how uncooperative people were, that by the time the event ended, I just wanted to like hide in my car and just not talk to anybody. And I remember as I was leaving, this guy came up to me. He said, "Rubin Paul Singh, thanks for organizing this. You did such a great seva." And it dawned on me at that point, I was like, what seva happened here? There was no seva. Like, I went through this whole experience filled with ego and anger and jealousy and you name it, you know, everything. That there was no kind of seva happening at that moment. And I think that helped sort of, it's something I think about. Any sort of undertaking I've taken from that point forward, I try to remember some of these things. I'm not saying that I've by any means mastered it, but these are some of the things that I run through my list when I start hitting those moments. So without ego, humility, compassion, integrity. Integrity, in a sense in which I mean that, is that the ends don't necessarily justify the means. And then also, that seva or social justice activism for the Sikh is not just an event. I hear it all the time, we say it at home a lot, okay, we're going to go to this, do this seva project. So a seva is not a project. Social justice activism is not an event. It's not something we do on a Saturday morning or we're going to do the week after next. This is something that's integrated with our lifestyle. Seva, social justice activism, is ingrained in the life of a Sikh that it becomes a lifestyle. And then a key point is that it's not just about being selfless. Just about being selfless. Like, I know this is where you were going with this, Paul saying when you say from the heart. It's that, you know, oftentimes I ask a group of kids and I say, well, what does seva mean? They say, it's selfless seva. I said, what's selfless seva? They said, well, it means you're not getting paid. And I'm like, no. Like, that's not what I want you to take away from this. It's not just about not getting paid. It's about having that connection. It's about having that connection with the God. That no matter what it is, what activity that I'm doing, if I'm helping disenfranchised people, if I'm helping people who have been underserved, whatever it is that I'm doing so with a connection with a God. And I'm feeling that simmering running through my mind. I'm feeling that simmering running through my veins. Make sense? Agree? Disagree? And then also this idea of seeing Wahyu in everyone. I sometimes cringe when I hear people say, oh, well, we're going to go help feed the needy. It's like, oh, you know, who's the needy? You know? That can change at any moment. Oftentimes I'm the needy. You know, that's all a matter of perception. So I believe that seeing Wahyu in everyone is important. I personally hope that when I try to help another person, it is not because they're the needy one. It's because my struggle is intertwined with theirs. I carry their challenges on my back. That's the role. So it's not that I am helping another person, it is that I am seeing Wahyu in everybody. And for me to help or do whatever I can that my body allows me to do, that's just me serving my group. And so all of this combined is that the idea of social justice activism, or the Sikh model, which we often refer to as seva, it's serving as an expression of love for the other. Thoughts? Agree? Disagree? Opinions?
No, I just want to know. You're saying like what a Sikh model for social justice activism, but aren't these the models for the regular Sikh too, not just for social justice activism, for all kinds of activism?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You could say that this is really just being a Sikh. But I think that's also kind of my point, is that should be integrated in the lifestyle. So seva and Sikhi, they sort of all intertwine together. So I think that's a very valid point that you raised.
Mighty question.
Anju.
So I missed the question I was going to note. So when you said you were filled with mixed emotions after doing that event, and someone just said, "Thank you for the seva," what happened there? What thought?
I think the thought there was that I don't feel I was really following any of these things. And so it really made me realize that if I really can't follow these things, this is not the seva that my guru really asked me. So this is the way. This is how I at least understand it. Serving as an expression of the guru. This is the way of the warrior for the Sikh. And so when Guru Sahib describes the warrior or the activist, he says, "Jako hardam lago ishtak mein so kahiyo kaise." That person is the warrior who is attached to hardam, attached to Wahidu's love. And then when I think about what Guru Sahib's view is on seva, what is his perspective or his context of seva? And this shabad always to me really helps me understand it. Gursikh need to log it. Jo keh soe par mano, har katha mera. So whatever Guru Sahib says, accept it, right? And how unique this is. And har ke sant suno, jampaye gu sevo beg beg. So all my friends, all my brothers and sisters, let's go. There's this sense of urgency that he speaks about. Let's go, quickly now, let's serve. Satgur sev kharachar pato, mat jano aaj ki kali. Let this service, let this seva be all that you need on these supplies on the path. Let's go. Drop everything else. Don't wait for today, don't wait for tomorrow. Don't worry about yesterday, don't worry about tomorrow. Let's go. Let's go, let's serve. So that is the perspective of love and justice. So then it comes down to Jagdala. So we talked about the why, we talked about the what. To me, Jagdala is about the how. And I was at as Nepal Singh's mentioned, there's a few high schools that I do some work with. And I teach at their school once a semester about, not just about Sikhi, but about tolerance and civil rights and that sort of thing. And then they come and visit our Gurdwara. It just so happened that this year, or this past semester, the students, the high school students who came to our Gurdwara, it happened to fall on like November 9th or 10th. I can't remember whether it was that Thursday or Friday, right after the election. And so, I went through the whole routine. We went through the whole sort of, description of everything that was going on in the Gurdwara. They asked some really good questions about what's going on in Gurdwaras and all that sort of thing, like we typically do. But then the questions kind of took a different turn. And they said, and I'll never forget this question, they said, because of what just happened during the election and the new presidency and the new era that we're in right now, how does this change things for you? Do you feel you can still practice your faith that you normally, in the way that you normally do? How do things change for you? And maybe I should have thought about it more, but the answer just came out of my mouth. And I said to him, I said, you know what? We have been practicing our faith under duress for about 500 years. So this is nothing. If I can think about it from the time, as I mentioned, that Guru Sahib said, I'm not going to wear the jinn. We have been under some form of attack ever since then. Granted, those attacks are in different degrees, but we have faced it all. in last year's camp, we had talked about the Alugara. And that was what a lot, and we talked about the sort of the post-Guru time period and some of the hardships that we had faced during that time. And I was amazed that after the Vardaka Lugara, where nearly a third of our population was wiped out completely. And after which, it would only be a matter of months before the Singhs and Gaurs would recapture the Hor. All in a matter of months. And so when I think about where we are at this current time, and I understand we're in a time right now that is a little bit, it's a gray area, right? Not only are the rights that we care about at risk, civil rights, human rights, the rights of the disenfranchised, the rights of minorities, but even just our appearance alone, we sometimes feel under pressure, under attack. But I help try to keep these things in perspective. I try to keep these things in perspective by looking at our heroes and our sheroes of the past and what they endured. And what I do know is that when they faced adversity, when they faced their challenges, they had a choice to either give up or to double down. And in every one of those cases, they doubled. They found those challenging opportunities to be the right time to reinvest further, to work harder, to strengthen their discipline, and to become closer to them. And that's at least what I take from looking at our heroes in the context of our current day time. Because I often look at these pictures and I wonder, like, what was it? What was it for any of them? What was it that made the Chote Sahibzade, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, who had the thong, the Sikh thong on their back, on their shoulders, when they were asked that decision that they had to make? What made them choose to give up their lives before that? What made Baba Deep Singh Shaheed enter that final battle against the Afghans? What made Bhai Taru Singh make that decision that he did, to rather give up his life than to give up his faith? Bhai Mani Singh, limb by limb, my Pako, Mata Pako, for running into battle, while others had had enough. Or Baba Jarnail Singh, General Shubeg Singh, to take on the might of the Indian Army for days. What was it? What was it about all of them? And to me, the thing that links them all together, as well as many others that I can't fit on the slide, is this commitment to their group. It was the commitment to the group. It's what gave them strength then, and it's what gives us strength now. So, when I think of Chardhi Kala, maybe I have it wrong, but I don't look at it as just high spirits or eternal optimism. To me, Chardhi Kala is not a tagline, it is not a motto, it is nothing like that. To me, Chardhi Kala, in its truest sense, is saying that when we are in our darkest hour, that I know that if I commit myself to my Guru, if I commit myself to my faith, and I'm willing to put in the discipline, then I know that the Guru has my back. And if the Guru has my back, everything's going to be okay. So when we talk about revolutions, these are the components that I think is essential. These are the components of social justice that can be the inspiration for larger movements. And so the example I gave to you about revolutions, I talked about the civil rights movement and such. I said that I've spoken about revolutions in the context of much larger things, larger events. When we talk about revolutions, that's what we typically talk about. Or we talk about the Singh Sabha, or we talk about what happened in '84, or we talk about the civil rights movement, or we talk about Arab Spring. There's so many different large revolutions that we talk about. But I also think that there are revolutions that are just important that we work on inside of us, or what I think of as the internal revolution. because there's many definitions to a revolution, but one of them that resonates with me is it's really any major transformational change. And just like that can happen into the social political world, it can also happen inside of us. Can anybody share any internal revolution that they had in their life? Anybody? Let's see some new hands. Any internal revolution that they have experienced?
I started kickboxing in January.
Sorry, can you say it a little
I
louder?
started kickboxing in January.
All right. And okay.
And I just kept it going.
Okay. And did you have some reservations about it before you started?
Yeah.
Like what?
Feeling not strong enough, feeling as if I had to do that, not knowing if I had time to make it a commitment, not knowing if it was going to become a habit, not knowing if it was just going to be a waste of time, just like another one of my, 1 month projects and never visited again. So.
Okay. And so then what got you through it?
I guess after the first few workouts, I realized I could feel my body. I could feel what my body was feeling, and it was a moment of like self-reflection and self-awareness that I had never really experienced before, and I felt much more grounded. And that sort of awareness was what kept me going. I wanted to chase that awareness. And
I was keeping a distance.
I'm
scared.
and actually, like after every workout, it was really nice to just hear my heart beating, and it was a sort of simran going on that way. So for me, it was not really about looking well or looking a certain way, but it was more of like, how can I get in touch and in tune with my body so that I can treat it with respect, and I can feel what it feels rather than spending time here.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Good. Anybody else?
I felt I could break the ice.
That's good. I appreciate it. Has anybody else experienced this internal revolution? It doesn't need to be big things. It can be small things.
Well, I have a short, not really a revolution, but a really amazing thing that happened when I took over in 2007. So I had to go, I was inspired by the Sangha that I lived with at the university, and then found out about Sikh, then I wanted to take over. So I went to the Mountain Gurdwara, and Guruji blessed Mountain Gurdwara is in Toronto, and then Guruji blessed me with Amrit, and thank you Guruji. And so right after the Amrit Sanchar, as soon as it came out, they said, okay, there's another Kirtan, Singh di Lord hai, tusi baat jaake Khanda Nishan Sahib paad ke sab ho jao. So I felt really blessed for this seva. And then came back to the university next day and had a midterm exam for semiconductor electronics. And it was one of the hardest courses I ever had. And my professor was, his name is Professor Anantram. He was a NASA scientist, came from NASA, wanted to teach at the University of Waterloo for 2 years. Then he went back to NASA. He really liked teaching. So the other midterm Sika, we had 6 questions in the midterm, and I finished 5 questions. And the 6th question was very hard. I कुछ नहीं पता सी मैं question में क्या कर सकता है. So मैंने चलो बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम पे है. So गुरुजी ने मुझे देखा मैं. So nothing else to do. So I'm just sitting over there and just without any like desire for anything. I just want to like instead of killing time, I want to make use of the time. So thank Guru Arjan Dev Ji, thank Guru Arjan Dev Ji, thank Guru Arjan Dev Ji, and just doing this. And then a thought strikes my mind, okay, I should write something in the paper. If there is some blue ink, maybe I'll get 1 mark just for having something. So I write the most weirdest of answers to the question. First question, समझ नहीं आ रहा था so something about electron tunneling. समझ नहीं आया. थोड़ा नहीं पता answer मैं क्या पर मुझे पता नहीं क्या. So I write the answer and then ਜਦੋਂ results आए I had a 99. It was मैंने बोल गया 99.5 से 99 से. ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੋਂ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਮਾਰਕ ਸੀਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੁੜੀ ਸੀਗੀ she had 87 ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਮੇਰੇ ਕਲਾਸ ਚ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਸੀ 84 ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਅੱਜ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਆਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ sorry takes me back ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਆਨਸਰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਇਹ ਆਨਸਰ ਸਿਰਫ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੀ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਪਬਲਿਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਆਨਸਰ ਮੈਂ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਨੂੰ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟ ਵੈਸੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹਦਾ ਆਨਸਰ ਹੋਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਵਰਡ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਆਨਸਰ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਬੜੀ and then in the final exam this is funny final exam you have again 6 questions ਉਹਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛ ਲਿਆ ਵੀ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੇ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਵੀ ਜੇ ਅੰਤਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਕਲਾਸ ਦਾ ਕੀ ਬਣੂਗਾ ਕਲਾਸ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੇਟ ਰੀਡਿਸਟ੍ਰੀਬਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੇਪਰ ਹੀ ਹੈ that's a big inspiration that ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਔਖੀ ਘੜੀ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ I always remember this and many other things in favor of
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for sharing.
I think my biggest revolution in my life was for sure become a Sikh. I grew up in a Catholic family, it's funny. My family is not as strict as her, but still like we have these traditions in generations and just pop up in my house with a star and no shave my legs or my armpits or whatever. They'll be like, what are you doing with your life? Are you in a sect? Are you a Muslim? Are you this and that? Facing the rejection of family members. More members of the family are more conservative than others, and they will harass my parents like, oh, it's Maria now, Muslim, why she's doing that? Is she becoming a terrorist? Like they will say mean jokes in front of me. I will like even like stand in front of my father and say like, can you please stop saying that we're terrorists because we're not. So not so much with my friends. My friends really didn't care if I became a Sikh or no. But my parents and mostly my family was my biggest challenge. And to confront the, how can I say, the everyday idea of I'm going to be rejected, society is not going to accept you, these people are not going to accept you either because you're not part of their culture, you're not going to find a job, oh my god, you're moving to the US, take off that, they're going to like, kill you in the street. So it's a lot of fear, injection of fear and panic, even though like I cannot say anything. If my guru wants me here, why am I going to stay back? And I was telling Virdi when I took Amrit, I didn't tell anything to my parents. I said, if I tell something to them, they're going to tell me, no, don't do it, don't do it. So I said like, no, I'm just not going to say anything, I'm just going to go. I went to my Panchpiyare house like 3 days in advance and stay there and see the Sangha. And Sangha will support me a lot. Obviously without the Sangha I wouldn't even be here. So after I was blessed with Amrit with this Kirpa, I called my mom, like, Mom, I'm hungry, I'm a Sikh now, like a proper Sikh. And she would like explode and scream at me and tell me a bunch of things, talk to my father, they even told me this and they're like, but you are Catholic baptized, you are not, you cannot be baptized by anything. And so I'm like, well, but what's a baby? You didn't ask me to be baptized. And she wouldn't talk to me like for 3 or 4 days, and it took me 3 years to take them to the Gurdwara and like show them, look, this is the people that I'm with now, this is the way we worship, and it's not very different like the Mass on Sunday. So my biggest challenge has been me and my family and Siki together. And I was telling Vivi, nowadays they actually feel proud of their daughter to be a Sikh, and they feel proud that, you know, yeah, she found her way to whatever her way of worship is, but at least she's happy and she's focused. And it took me a while to skip as Baisali was telling the story. You just need to take one little like decision, and then everything's gonna just fall. So yeah, that was my biggest revolution so far in my life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else would like to share?
First off, words also is nothing. And just that I think maybe just I just had an experience with some inner conflicts and all that, and just I tried to think through it and try to like resolve them and all, and then it worked out good, like through the use of some. Well, they say that actually to overcome some kind of that you need to do like. Well, they normally say like just like you said, like anxiety and like a depression. You overcome through like meditation or doing like service or volunteering or helping like younger kids in the community or like just doing bunch of other things. So over the past few years, I've kind of overcome that through the use of just reading, and just read, Gurbani and do like, okay.
Very good.
Thank you. I think this is exactly it. That for each of us, the challenges that we face are so unique. Whether it is, but they are equally difficult for all of us. I had another thought, but I wanted to make sure anybody else had a chance to speak. Would anybody else like to share their experience or any sort of internal revolution or change that they've been through?
Well, she already covered the converging part, so it's very similar. But I did have a supportive family, like my mom. She was very supportive of me becoming a Sikh. But prior to Sikhi, I was like going down such a bad track. I was hanging out with black people and like doing things I shouldn't have been doing, and I always had piercings in my face, like gauges, piercings. I had like really long blonde dreadlocks, and I was not in the right state, and I was like dealing with a lot of like depression and sadness and anger, and like my self-esteem was low because I was always teased for this thing or that thing, and just like coming to Sikhi, I still to this day I beat myself up because I'm like, I don't know my body, like a memory. So I feel like I changed my life like so quickly for Waheguru, because when it hit me hard. Like I spent 5 days taking out dreadlocks because I refused to cut my hair, and I took out all my piercings, and I used to tell my mom, like my mom used to beg me, please take off the piercings, you don't need that, you're beautiful without it. But I used to hide my beauty, hide my piercings and my makeup and my dreads and everything. And give me a second, sorry. So like coming to Sikhi, and like I feel so much more empowered, and I feel beautiful, and I don't need my piercings, I don't need any of these things, because why didn't make me with piercings? And when white hit me, it was like I felt happy, for the first time in my life. I always had a cloud, and when I went to the Gurmat, I experienced sitting with this one guy. I went outside and it was like a wall was like just taking off, or like if I was in a box and the box was just taking off and I could see the sun, and I was like, these things don't matter. Like that's why I gave myself a 6 on this scale, because I really did change my life for what good. Like they were friends that I had been friends with for so long, and I stopped talking to them, you know, because I was like, I don't want to be on this truck. I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't want to be abusing substances I shouldn't have been using any at all, and like manipulating my body. And I still am hard on myself. I am very hard on myself, but I had a very tough mother who was like, you have to get in, you have to be at the top of your class and stuff. So it still hurts me, like if I'm not perfect in my body, I'm like, oh. Like why do you think I'm such a bad seed, you know? But then I'm like, no, why do you doesn't think that? I think that of myself. But it's all a part of my journey, you know, because I'm still learning. I'm still learning, and I'm going to continue to be learning. And there's always going to be things I don't know. I'm not ever going to be perfect in this. But I'm grateful that I was put on this path. Because had it not been for this path, I don't even know if I would even be alive. Because that's where I was. I was in a rock, in a hard place, you know. And I didn't want to experience this, you know. So that's like, I go through that every day, you know. I still think about like my imperfection, but I know that my Guru has better plans for me, you know. So thank you. Thank you
for sharing. At a loss for words. You know, this is the definition of a revolution, that internal revolution. And you know, just like when we talk about revolutions in the social political framework, as I mentioned earlier, they don't happen overnight. In fact, the revolutions that happen overnight are the first to fizzle out. They need to be cultivated. They happen step by step. You know, people are wondering where Bernie Sanders came from. You know, Bernie Sanders has been around all along, but it was lots of things. It was Arab Spring. It was Black Lives Matter. It was so many things that cultivated that movement to make Bernie Sanders and whoever else wear this sort of face of a movement. I know it's a silly example, but I think the point I'm making is it's same for that internal revolution. Things don't happen overnight. I know I've been into, you know, Balpreet Kaur is probably in better shape than I am, because I know that I've gone to the gym and said, you know, I want to bulk up, and then I just go for the heaviest weights I can find and I start lifting. And I fail and I'm in pain for days and I'm done with it. But had I been smarter about it, I would have taken it slow. I would have started with those lighter weights, built up my strength, and gotten stronger and stronger over time. There's no rush for the revolution. It's just constantly improving from one day to the next. And although you're saying that from a perspective of someone who's relatively new to the faith, there's probably a few people in this room who are not not in that same boat with you, also trying to continually improve on themselves. Maybe it's different things, maybe it's the same things, but we all have something that we're working on. Anybody else like to share? There was a time where I found my, I'll close on this, I'm going to be a little early, if that's okay. I don't want to push the discussion any further than anybody's comfortable with, but I would say that there was a time that I found the external revolution and the internal revolution intertwined with one another. And I think it's an interesting story. I had just moved to Chicago and I didn't know too many people, and I decided I had this sort of spare time on my hands, and I decided to volunteer like crazy, like every day, 7 days a week at different places, and just learn as much as I can about different sort of nonprofit models, social justice models, and just be around other activists. And so it didn't matter, like one day it was Habitat for Humanity, next day it was a crisis line, third day it was Salvation Army, fourth day, like every day was something different. And for anybody who's thinking of a gap year after college, I recommend it. It is probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life. But I decided I wanted to volunteer at a domestic violence shelter. They had a few different programs. One is they had a crisis line, and they also had a program to do work with children while their mothers were in therapy. And so I signed up for both these things, but they told me that I couldn't do it just like that. I had to sign up for a training. And it was a 40-hour training. So I took some time off of work, and I said, I'm going to do it. And what I learned in those 40 hours just was transformational in itself. I had not been exposed much, but I had my stereotypes about what domestic violence was and who was a domestic violence abuser. I had this picture in my mind of a certain person, certain socioeconomic situation, the big person who can't control their anger, and I sort of had these myths in my head of who was high profile for a domestic violence situation. But this particular place where I learned about domestic violence was based on this idea that domestic violence exists in society because of the rigid sexism that happens in our society. And anybody is really susceptible to it. And I remember diligently taking notes because I was so fascinated with all this. And they were saying, it's not who you think. The person who is at high risk for being a domestic abuser is not who you might think. They said, think about anybody who grew up in a very patriarchal society. Think about someone who was asked to, as boys who were asked to repress their feelings when they were young, or boys who were told, don't cry, only girls cry, or people who were said, hey, you gotta protect your sister if she can't take care of herself. Think about the people, and I was writing down these notes, and I was writing, and I was like, wait a second. Wait a second, like, they're describing me. They're describing my upbringing. And it was this sort of revelation I had, and I almost had like a panic attack afterwards because I was like, oh my God, here I was thinking that I'm trying to help this situation, and I realized, I could be part of the problem. Now granted, maybe I was not on that high degree of the spectrum, but I was on the spectrum. And I started thinking about all those times in life where in the locker rooms, playing high school sports, where I heard all that misogynistic conversation, and I didn't say a word. Now I didn't participate, but I didn't stop it either. And I think about all those times in my life where all those things were said and all those things were done, and I was a bystander. And I realized that if I really was going to be an ally, if I really was going to be an activist in this sense, I needed to straighten up inside first. I needed to clear up all those inconsistencies that were going on within. That was the revolution that needed to happen for me. And again, far from perfect, but I'm a lot more mindful now than I was then about the conversations that I have, about treatment, about how I interact with others. All of that is now with that context of understanding those things that I learned in that course over a period of 40 hours. So I think that hopefully that lesson can sort of be carried out to other aspects of this. That external revolution and the internal revolutions, we as SIX need to be working on both. It's sometimes people say one or the other, but I don't know if we ever fully are done with either of those. Any other thoughts before we wrap up? Anything anybody like to share? So I think the way I'd like to conclude this is, I hope what you've taken from this idea of social activism, social justice activism, the love, the chartikala, the justice, the internal revolutions, I hope you see how these join together. I know they join together in my head. I'm never sure if I've articulated in a way that people can understand it in the same way I am. But I hope that what you take from this is that whatever your passion is, whatever your cause is, I tell kids when I go to the high schools, and I say, you know what, I don't want you to stereotype us in any way, but if you're going to stereotype us as people who serve. When you meet a Sikh, ask them, what's your cause? What's your charity? Because I can guarantee you every Sikh has a cause, every Sikh has a charity, every Sikh has something they're passionate about, and they're actively working on it. I guarantee it. And I believe it. And I believe everyone in you in this room have something, whether it's homelessness, whether it's hunger, whether it's civil rights, whether it's poverty alleviation, whether it's human rights, whether it's reproductive rights, whatever it is that cause that you have, pour your heart into it. This is what the Guru asks us. But pour your heart into a way that takes into account some of these things that we mentioned. That without ego, that with humility, that connection to a Galpur, that serving as an expression of love for Wahid. Whatever means or whatever vehicle, whatever method you choose, if you're a rapper, rap about it, if you're a writer, write about it, if you're a singer, sing about it, whatever it is, if you're an artist, paint about it, draw about it, whatever it is, take that cause, make it yours, and make that an expression of love for Wahid. And I know that that might seem daunting, all these things that we've talked about over the last hour. But we as Sikhs have to do our own part. You know, I remember asking some of the things when I used to go to protest, and they used to say the same thing. I don't know if what I'm going to do, you know, in post-84 protests, I don't know if what I'm going to do is really making a difference. But I know I can't sit down. I know I can't sit quietly. I know I can't sit, you know, comfortably in my home and call myself an activist. I need to be out there. And so I'll conclude with a short story from this is from Bhagat Puran Singh. Anybody know who Bhagat Puran Singh is? Kanji, can you tell me who it is? Say it. Okay. A little louder. That's Professor Puran Singh. They're very close though. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, yes, yes. He founded Pingalwada, and can anybody tell me what Pingalwada is?
People with disability, the people with disability and various problems. So it's a place where they are taken care of.
Okay. And that's good. That's good. And I encourage you. I know more of you know about him than the hands that went up. But if you don't know about him, I would encourage you to please read about him. A pretty extraordinary life. And whenever we talk about social justice activism and seva and the Sikh model of social justice, for whatever reason, he's the first one that comes to my mind. And so a friend of mine who went to the Bandhamit Taksal, he was a kid, a teenager, and he used to run into Bhagatji in the streets of Amritsar. And he told me a story about one of their encounters. And it's one of my favorite little stories. He says that he encountered Bhagatji once, and he was roaming around the streets of Amritsar. And he was picking up rocks from the road. And he was picking up trash from the road. And he was slowly, one by one, moving it to the side or keeping it in his bag. He was moving the rocks out of the way, and any sort of piece of trash you could find, little papers, whatever it was. And this is Amritsar. This is not like, you know, I mean, imagine how dirty these streets might be. And he was slowly picking up pieces of trash. And my friend, you know, him, he was teenagers at the time, and his other friends, they kind of jokingly went up to him and said, well, gee, you know, as though he had sort of lost his mind. He said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm picking up, you know, picking up the trash from the street. And they said, jokingly to him, kind of messing with him, they said, well, Amritsar's a big city. Do you think you're really going to clean up all the streets? How much do you think you can really do here? And he answered, he said, when I come face to face with a Akal Purkh, he's not going to ask me if I cleaned up all of Amritsar. He's going to ask me if I cleaned my way. And that's always been a lesson to me. I may not be able to accomplish all that it is that I want to accomplish. Maybe the big revolutions that I have in mind. But I need to clear my mind. I need to do what I can. And make sure that whatever I do is an expression of love for the Guru. And it's a reflection of the love. Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.